As we await the president stepping off the plane there as they move the air stairs into place, the former ambassador to NATO, Kurt Volker, is with us. Mr. Ambassador, what are your thoughts about what might come of this meeting today?
Well, let's skip ahead to the bottom line. I think the likely outcome is that Putin says, okay, I'll have a meeting with you and Zelensky, but the conditions have to be right. The conditions aren't ready yet. So it'll be yes, but from Putin, which really means no. That's where I think this is going. I don't believe he'll go for a ceasefire. Putin will not relax any of his maximalist demands. And he's going to try to change the subject. He's going to try to bring up other issues like arms control, nuclear weapons, trade deals, rare earth minerals, who knows what. But he's going to try to avoid the conversation about a ceasefire in Ukraine. So hopefully President Trump just sticks to his guns.
Well, so that would seem to indicate that the latter option that President Trump was talking about with our Brett Baer, that he's just going to get back on the plane and go home, might be the likeliest option. He said that, but I don't think he's going to do that. I think he's going to want to play it out. He's going to look for the next diplomatic opportunity. And I just hope that he finally follows through on his threats of secondary tariffs, severe consequences for the Russian economy, because that's what it's going to take for Putin to be convinced that it actually is time to end the war. Right now, Putin thinks he can play this.
Ambassador, and I highly doubt that he'll just turn around, because he's bringing quite a big delegation with him to this summit. He's got his foreign policy advisor, his foreign minister, his defense minister, his finance minister, and very interestingly enough, the Kremlin's business envoy, Kirill Dmitriev. What does that tell you about, obviously this is a very high stakes meeting. This is about ending the Ukraine war. But what does this delegation tell you about what could come out of this?
Yeah, I think Putin is trying to dangle lucrative opportunities in front of President Trump to convince him that Trump needs to do more to convince Ukraine to surrender. This is all about Putin saying, look, I'd love to get out of sanctions. We have great natural resources in Russia. We can share them with you. We can build a bright future together if only you could get the Ukrainians to give up. And that, I think, is what Putin is trying to do. I don't think Trump will fall for that. I think Trump is going to do exactly the same thing with Putin, saying, yeah, there's a lot we could do together. We could help you out, but you got to end the war first. And Trump, I think they're just not going to be able to agree today.
Sound like you flipped the coin to see how this is going to go. So in terms of land and whether or not Putin ends this war, I mean, I could keep coming up with this idea that President Trump, like he offered Kim Jong-un, and Kim Jong-un obviously didn't take it when they met in Singapore, the benefits of economic development and being welcomed back into the global community of nations and being a good player on the world stage and looking after your country and your people's economy and well-being and prosperity. I mean, what's more important to Putin, that or a little tiny slice of Ukraine?
Neither. What's important to Putin is his historic legacy in rebuilding the Russian Empire.
He's not doing too well at that.
Well, he is not giving up. He's taken what he calls Novorossiya, which is a part of territory of Ukraine that he believes has always been Russian, even though it hasn't. Yeah. He wants to get control of all of Ukraine through a change in government and then controlling who's in charge, just like they did with the Warsaw Pact after World War II. He wants that to be his. And he wants to go down in history right along Catherine the Great and Peter the Great as one of the great accumulators of Russian lands. That's what motivates Putin.
Ambassador, what is the off-ramp then? I think this is what's boggling all of our minds right now as we're watching this summit and the president just about to come out of Air Force One. We know the Russian president will ask for the moon and the stars and all of the land, and the Ukrainian president will reject all of that. And maybe that's what he wants him to do. Maybe he wants to point to Zelensky and say to Trump, well, look, he doesn't want to make a deal. And try to
that's exactly yes.
I mean, can you elaborate on that? What is the off ramp?
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. So we have to remember here that President Trump has wanted to have a ceasefire for months. Zelensky agreed almost right away and is willing to meet any time. And it is Putin who is rejecting a ceasefire and who has been stalling and dragging his feet on meetings or any meaningful steps. And Putin has not changed any of his maximalist demands. But you're absolutely right. Putin wants to try to flip that onto Zelensky and make it appear that somehow Putin is being reasonable and Zelensky's not, which of course is not the case. So that's the dynamic Putin wants to create. Now, the off-ramp, if you want to use that word, what has to happen here is Putin has to become convinced that it is going to get worse for Russia the longer this goes on. Financially, militarily, politically, his position is crumbling. If he feels that, then he has an incentive to end the war. But right now he doesn't feel that, so he's not going to do it.
So let me come back to what you said about Putin's maximalist tendencies and wanting to go down in history as a modern-day Catherine the Great who expanded the Russian Empire, I mean, right into and over Eastern Europe. I mean, Stalin expanded it probably more than anybody with the Warsaw Pact and the Soviet Union. He's not doing a very good job at expansion. He's got a very tiny slice of the eastern part of Ukraine. He might have grand designs to take over all of Ukraine and back into the Baltic states and whatever else he might have in his strange fantasy, but he's not doing very well at getting that.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I would agree that he did not expect the Ukrainians to fight. He expected to waltz into Kyiv in 3 days' time. And frankly, our intelligence community assessed the same thing. Mm-hmm. But the Ukrainians were prepared. They fought. They pushed the Russians out after a few days because they were poorly prepared and led and trained. And now it's dug into this front line that we see on the maps all the time. And Putin and his forces are having a hard time advancing. But they have adopted different tactics now. They are just throwing wave after wave of people at that front line, advancing small amounts of territory at a time, but grinding down the Ukrainians. And Putin is prepared to just keep doing that in the belief that ultimately he can force a win.
But Ambassador, do you agree with Dan Hoffman, who was telling us that, the people to watch right now is the inner circle? And they are really the ones that can put the pressure on Putin to move him off of this legacy building, madness that he's waging right now. Is that true? Are there people within his inner circle that will get so fed up if this goes on and on and on without any positive results for Russia that could influence him?
I'm not so sure. I appreciate Dan, and I know he's got a lot of contacts there, but I think it is different now. I think Putin has, ever since 22, when he launched this war, he has really made this a personal crusade. And they have ramped up authoritarianism and crackdowns inside of Russia, long prison sentences, even just for calling it a war rather than a special military operation. Any political opposition has been silenced. So Putin himself has got to be the one who sees that this is going to be a disaster for the state of Russia and perhaps for his rule if it gets to that point. And I don't think there are others around him right now who are prepared to tell him that. Just look at the sweatshirt that Lavrov wore getting off the plane. USSR, right across his sweatshirt. That is a message that he's trying to convey.
Well, I mean, if anybody's got their wagon firmly hitched to Putin, it's Lavrov. But maybe one of these days,
That's right.
Maybe one of these days, Putin will outlive his notoriety. Ambassador, thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Congressional Democrats remained skeptical that any progress toward an end to the war in Ukraine would be made ahead of the meeting between President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin. The high-stakes meeting in Anchorage, Alaska, comes as lawmakers have grown anxious to see an end to the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. And with many ready to slap a bone-breaking sanctions package on Moscow and its allies unless Putin relents. But Democrats are not so sure that Trump will yield results in his closed-door meeting with Putin, the first between U.S. and Russian leaders since the invasion of Ukraine in 2022. I fear this meeting could once again end with America ceding ground to an autocrat who has spent his career undermining democratic values, Senator Mark Warner, Diva, and the top Democrat on the Senate Intel Committee said. He warned that there could be no concessions without Ukraine's involvement, Russia's withdrawal from Ukrainian territory, and enforceable guarantees for Ukraine's security. Anything less would be an invitation for further aggression from Moscow and every autocrat watching to see if the United States still has the backbone to defend the principles that have kept Americans safe since the Second World War, he said. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, DNY, accused Trump of previously playing footsie with Putin, but noted that it appeared that the president's disposition toward his Russian counterpart had shifted. He added that last year, House Democrats and Republicans worked together to pass another military aid package for Ukraine, and likened it to a Churchill or Chamberlain moment. "We are either going to appease the dictator, or we're going to aggressively oppose the dictator," Jeffries said. And as we saw with Chamberlain, appeasing the dictator never works. Trump himself sought to set expectations for the summit, telling Fox News Radio earlier this week that there would be a 25% chance that the meeting would end in failure. And aboard Air Force One, Trump told reporters that he wanted to see a ceasefire rapidly. "I don't know if it's going to be today, but I'm not going to be happy if it's not today," he said. "Everyone said it can't be today, but I'm just saying I want the killing to stop." The Trump administration has threatened to slap secondary tariffs on India, a major buyer of Russian oil, if the meeting did not go well. That comes after Trump gave Putin a 50-day deadline to reach a ceasefire agreement, which the president recently shortened to 10 or 12 days. Senator John Shaheen, the top Democrat on the Senate Foreign Intelligence Committee, told reporters that people have been willing to give the White House and the president the benefit of the doubt. But if he doesn't produce anything at this summit, after drawing red line after red line, there will be growing concern and a growing pressure to try and get something done, the New Hampshire Democrat said. One area where many lawmakers in the upper chamber agree is the necessity for a sanctions package against Russia. Currently, Senators Lindsey Graham, RSC, and Richard Blumenthal, Decon, have a bill in the works that would slap up to 500% tariffs on countries buying energy products from Moscow. Blumenthal told MSNBC earlier this week if Trump stood firm and insisted on a ceasefire, Putin come to the table with European leaders and secure security guarantees, he has the makings of a potential agreement that could win him the Nobel Peace Prize. But my fear is that he will be the mercurial Donald Trump who allowed the deadline for sanctions to pass last Friday without any imposition of new levies on Russia, and that he will fail to adhere to those principles adopted yesterday by the European countries in their meeting, he said.